Hey guys, well, welcome back to my channel. So we are back to another episode of our series, What is the Gospel? And even though we've been going at this for a minute, we're gonna start another part, and it's titled "A Matter of the Heart, Sin." And this series is very important because there is no gospel if there was no sin. There would be no gospel if sin wasn't the issue. And you can never really fully grasp or understand the gospel or really embrace it if you don't understand what sin is or why we even need a gospel. And the only way you can understand that is if you have a real and a full understanding of sin. And even though there's a lot of talk about sin in the church, a lot of people haven't grasped the real meaning of the word. And we can see that in the way we trivialize sin, we water it down, and we try and oversimplify it to the fact that sometimes we define sin as simply doing the wrong things. And I'm also guilty of that. And the reason why this definition is so wrong is because it's too basic. Because if sin is just doing the wrong things, then the solution for sin would be doing the right things, right? But sin is so much more deeper than that. It goes beyond our actions. In fact, when it comes to sin, our actions isn't the issue. It's our heart. Our heart is the issue. And that means the solution for sin is not to change your actions, but it's a heart transplant. That is why in Ezekiel 36, verse 26, God's solution for Israel's sin was actually a heart transplant. He said that he would give them a new heart. Because one thing that God, of course, knows and understands is that sin is a heart issue at the end of the day. So if you want to find a solution to sin, you need to fix a heart. So to illustrate the origins of sin, or to illustrate how sin actually stems from the heart, we're going to examine the first sin in the Garden of Eden. And many of us kind of know the story. God told Adam and Eve not to eat a fruit. A serpent came, said some sweet words to Eve. She ate, gave to Adam. Boom, here we are. And like whenever we render this story, many times we tend to put a lot of blame on the serpent, right? And by the way, the serpent represents the devil, as seen in Revelation 12, verse 9. And even today, when people sin and make mistakes, they are quick to blame it on Satan. Like, I don't know if y'all have ever seen those movies or like seen something in where a guy would cheat and he is caught red-handed, like he is caught in the action. And the first thing he's like, it was the devil. It was Satan. It was Satan. And I'm just like, okay. So Satan took your two legs to her room. Like Satan's one leg. And I'm not trying to say that Satan does not have a role in temptation, or that he doesn't lead people astray. In fact, in Revelation 12, verse 9, it does say that Satan leads people astray. But what I'm trying to say is that we play more of a role into falling into sin than we like to admit. And we can even see this in church settings. Like anytime like something goes wrong or there's a mistake or maybe a scandal or whatever, they're quick to say, it was Satan. It was the devil. And at that point, we're not taking the blame or the responsibility for our actions. We're saying, well, I'm good. It was Satan that made me do everything. And yet, Satan does have a role to play, but at the end of the day, we made a choice. The meaning of temptation, or to tempt, means to entice to do wrong. That means temptation is just a suggestion. It's like somebody telling me, hey, Damien, you should go jump off a cliff. I mean, and the person isn't forcing me to jump off the cliff. They're just like, hey, I think you should jump off a cliff. It'll be fun. The ambulance will come. You get to be in a hospital bed, hospital food, blah, blah, blah. No. And that's the same thing that happened in the garden, because the serpent didn't force Eve to do anything. She really could have said like no and walked away. at the end of the day, Eve made her choice. And the reason she fell into sin is it, yes, the temptation played a role, but she ate that fruit because she wanted to eat the fruit. And the reason she wanted to eat the fruit is because her heart wasn't in the right place. It had turned from the Lord and it had turned to her own selfish desires. Let's look at Genesis 3, verse 6. The woman saw that the tree was good for food and delightful to look at, and that it was desirable for obtaining wisdom. So she took some of its fruit and ate it. At the end of the day, yes, temptation is Satan's attempt to push us into sin. However, sin occurs when we actually cooperate with Satan and commit the act. For example, let's look at a car. When you put your key into the keyhole and you turn it, the car starts because of the starter. One spark sets off the engine, but after that initial spark, the engine works on its own. However, for the spark to start the car, there has to be an engine. If the car doesn't have the engine, the starter won't work because it has nothing to work on. Therefore, the car will not start, no matter how good your starter is. And when it comes to temptation, temptation is like the starter. It only ignites what's already inside of us, our desires, which is kind of like our engines too, because our desires is what fuels our actions. And actually, this is what the Bible says in James 1:14-15. But each one is tempted when he's dragged away, enticed, and baited to commit sin by his own worldly desire, lust, passion. Then when the illicit desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and when sin has run its course, it gives birth to death. So at the end of the day, people fall into sin because they had the desire to fall into sin. One thing I do want to highlight is that having a desire does not automatically mean we will engage in sin. In James 1:14-15, which we just read, it shows us a process to sin. After one is tempted and intense by desire, the desire gives birth to sin. However, the desire does not always give birth to sin. For example, I could feel like cussing someone out. Don't mean I'm gonna cuss them out. I could feel like, have you ever been so angry you felt like hurting someone? You don't always hurt the person. So you can have a desire to do it, but that does not mean you would actually do it. So the question now is, when does desire lead to sin? What actually happened in the garden? What went wrong that made Adam and Eve fall into sin? And that's a question we will answer in our next video. Brief recap. So today we discussed about sin and how our desire is what leads us to sin. That it's not always Satan, Satan, Satan. Yes, Satan plays a role, but sometimes we have to look within ourselves and see what went wrong. In our next video, we're going to examine when desire actually leads to sin, because, as we said, desire does not always lead to sin. Okay, y'all. Well, I hope y'all like this video. Make sure y'all stay tuned for the next one. Make sure y'all share, y'all like, and y'all subscribe. Bye.